Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah amma ba'd. We're continuing the benefits of lowering one's gaze. We reached the fifth benefit, and Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi says أنه يورث القلب أنسا بالله وجمعية عليه. No, I'm sorry, that's not it. أنه يكسب القلب نورا كما أن إطلاقه يكسبه ظلمة. So Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi mentioned that one of the harms of not lowering one's gaze is that it creates a type of darkness in the heart, spiritually speaking. And I mean, that goes back to the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ says that when a person does a sin, it puts a black spot on the heart, but when they do a good deed, it puts a white spot on the heart, meaning the black is the misguidance or the hardening of the heart, while the white is the opposite. And so if looking at haram negatively affects the heart, looking at the not looking at the haram and restricting oneself from looking at the haram does the exact opposite. It gives health and strength to the heart. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He mentions the command of lowering the gaze, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. What does Allah talk about afterwards? So Allah talks about He's giving social advice and regulations on social relationships to men and women. Tell the women to lower the gaze. Tell the women to lower the gaze. Women wear the hijab, among other things. Don't enter homes unless you have permission. Well, why? Well, that's part of lowering the gaze. I mean, can you imagine entering the home and someone's not dressed properly? Especially back then, when the size of a home is pretty much a room or two. So you're bound to see someone as soon as you enter. Now, after Allah is discussing all of this, what verse comes up? Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. And the placement of verses aren't random. There's a reason why Allah placed this verse and this surah in after this context. As though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah is saying here, it's as though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alluding that if you want that nur of Allah, well, here's a list of things that you can do. You'll find the nur of Allah in the masajid. You'll find the nur of Allah in His remembrance. When you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll find the nur of Allah when you look at the universe around you. He's mentioning all of these things. But don't forget about what's before. It's as though, because we asked the question, well, why did Allah talk about this before the nur and not after? If it was part of acquiring nur, then why not make it after, as Allah has given us this list? So He talks about knowing Allah, preserving the fitrah, about salah, about zakah, about the universe, and then maybe He could have talked about lowering the gaze. So it begs the question, why did Allah put it before or after? It's not random. Perhaps, Wallahu ta'ala alam, the reason is that when we look at the haram, all these other things become less valuable, or we're not able to get the best out of those things. Someone who's constantly looking at the haram, it's going to affect their ability to see the universe as the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's going to be hard for them to see Allah's names and attributes in that. Someone who's constantly looking at haram, how are they going to have khushu' in salah when they have a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And when you look at the negative harms of pornography, well, how does that harm one's financial spending, their financial philosophy? I don't know, I haven't done the research, but it begs the question. So if you really want the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it starts by what you're using this for. Use this for the halal and what pleases Allah, it'll open up the doors for all these other lights. But if this is constantly looking at the haram, then it will diminish its ability to see beyond the physical. That's all the person will see. Okay? And then they'll lose the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The sixth benefit, there we go. I thought I admitted her. Now she's in.
Maybe that was shaytan. This is all the start of the essence.
So the sixth benefit, أنه يورث فراسة صادقة يميز بها بين الحق والباطل والصادق والكاذب. We come back to this idea of filasa. We spoke about this a little bit. We didn't dive too deep because it's a complex idea. But this concept of filasa, which can be translated as intuition, right? You know, the lady's sixth sense, so you can tell what's going on. It's called filasa. And filasa is this ability to extract the nuanced details and information and realities by what you see. So when you look at someone, what do you see in their face? Now, there are things that are obvious. If a person's mad, they're happy, that's obvious. Anyone can do. But for some people, their filasa, their intuition is so strong, they can begin to extract their past from them. Like Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala an, he saw a person walking or on a horse, and he looked at that guy and he said, that guy is either a fortune teller, a kahin, or was a fortune teller. So he goes to that guy, curious, and he asks the guy, who are you? Tell me about your past. Are you a fortune teller or were you a fortune teller? He said, by Allah, I was a fortune teller before I accepted Islam. And then Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, right, that's not enough for him. He's more curious. Tell me about the strangest thing that you saw. It's kind of a little bit tangent, but the story is so cool. He said, you know, us fortune tellers, each one of us has a jinn that we collaborate with. Yeah, they have a jinn who we collaborate with. And we get information from them about what's going on, where things are. So you go to a fortune, you know, someone goes to a fortune teller and they say, I lost my keys, for example. I can't find them. It's like, okay, I can find it for you. The jinn goes, looks for the key, goes to the fortune teller and says, this is where the key is. Fortune teller says, this is where the key is. The person goes, Mash, oh subhanallah, wow, this is really true, right? And this is why Isa alayhi salam, when he challenged his people, he said, وَأُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا تَأْكُلُونَ وَمَا تَدَّخِرُونَ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ. I can tell you what you hide from, the things that you hide, right, as a type of miracle. Right? Now you might say, well, the jinn can do the same thing, so how is that miraculous? Well, Isa alayhi salam would say, take something, go hide it, and say Bismillah. Now the jinn can't access it. But Isa alayhi salam is coming and saying, this is where it is. So that people know he's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's being assisted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's not a fortune teller, he's not a kahin, he's not any of this stuff. So this fortune teller is saying, each one of us has a jinn that we work with. And I had a jinn, her name was whatever. And then one day, the jinn came, and the jinn is screaming. And then the jinn says a bunch of rhyming things. I forgot what it was. But basically, the jinn is expressing anxiety, fear. Oh my God, this is happening. Oh my God, this is happening. What's happening? What's happening? And the jinn said, رَجُلٌ يَقُولُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Right? A man has come out who's saying, La ilaha illallah. So that was the strangest thing he ever saw, and it caught his curiosity. Why is this jinn going all crazy? And it caused him to explore what's really going on, and eventually accepting Islam and leaving fortune telling. So firasa, going back to the main topic, firasa is this ability to see beyond the physical, right? And it's something from Allah, direct from Allah. And back in Madaj al-Salikin, I didn't dive into it because I don't want to confuse anyone. And it's something that comes from Allah. There really is no way of improving it besides doing good deeds. And we're supposed to do good deeds in the first place, whether it gives us firasa or not. So I didn't dive into it as to not confuse anyone and as to not have people say, oh, I have this. Let's go ahead and start looking at people's faces and, yeah, that guy's good, this one's bad, be careful of this. It's not the way it works, right? It's not the way it works. And personally, I don't have experience in, strong firasa, so I don't know how to navigate that. But the idea is, the more we preserve our sight and we lower our gaze, the more nur that's in our heart, and that nur, right, unveils things. So the hadith, beautiful hadith, we all know it, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever harms my friend, then I wage war against them. And that the best thing to bring you closer to me is doing the obligatory acts. And a person will continue to do extra good deeds, the nawafil, the sunan, until I love them. And if I love them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I become their ears, their sight, where they go, what they use their hands for. Essentially, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this individual has preserved his or her body in that which pleases Allah, Allah rewards them by preserving his or her senses, her faculties, in manners that continues to bring them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi, I forgot where he said this. I always want to pull this back up because it's so beautiful. But he says that one of the meanings here is that you will not be deceived so easily by the lies and the deceptions of people. Right? So when someone says something that's not truthful, that nur in the heart will give you the feeling this person isn't saying the truth. And someone might be saying the truth, and people might not be believing them. That nur in the heart says, no, this person's saying the truth. That is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now again, there are some things that are obvious, or some things that can come from social experience. You know that the whole UFO stuff that started coming out? Like NASA saying there's UFO, and the Pentagon is releasing things. All of a sudden it stopped, right?
Yeah.
I was sitting there looking at this, where's this all coming from? Why are they releasing this? And I think the answer is pretty obvious. They're trying to distract the population from pretty big problems that can have a snowball effect, right? But you don't really need filasa to figure that out. It's pretty obvious. But the idea is they're saying something, but the person who has experience or filasa knows that there's something else going on here. That's not really what's happening. So where does it come from? It comes from, or part of it is by lowering the gaze. وكان ابن شجاع الكرماني يقول من عمر ظاهره باتباع السنة وباطنه بدوام المراقبة وغض بصره من المحارم أو عن المحارم وكف نفسه عن الشبهات واغتدى بالحلال لم تخطئ له فراسة. So this individual, Ibn Shuja', says that whoever uses their physical selves, their bodies, to follow the sunnah, their inner selves, to constantly remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be conscious of Allah's presence, and they lower their gaze from that which is haram, and they take themselves out of misconceptions. They don't start to play this game of misconceptions. They eat that which is halal, then their firasa will never be wrong. These are the things that we can do. And you might be thinking, man, there's a lot of pretty cool things, right? But Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi then mentions the hadith, "Man taraka shay'an lillah, awadahu Allahu khayran min." Whoever leaves something for the sake of Allah, Allah gives them something better. Let's be real. Let's be real with each other. Let's be honest with each other. We're attracted to the opposite gender. And so it's pleasurable, it's nice, it's natural to want to see the things that you're attracted to. Your physiology, our physiology is made this way, right? And so when a person lowers their gaze, it's not a simple task. It's not. Our bodies want to look, and we have to fight that. Just like our selves don't want to give money. We want to make money. We don't want to give money. So when we give sadaqah, it's a jihad. You're fighting it. And so Allah doesn't leave that in vain. He replaces that with something better. You left something with difficulty. You left it for the sake of Allah, to please Allah. Then Allah is going to replace it with something better. And this is a lifestyle that we all need to live by. We need to carve this in our hearts, because it's pretty exciting. This beautiful hadith, whoever leaves something for the sake of Allah, Allah gives them something better. Who doesn't want better? That's where we're wired this way. As the Prophet ﷺ says, if the child of Adam has a valley of gold, what would happen? We would want more. We want another valley. And the Prophet ﷺ says, the child of Adam will never be satisfied, or the only thing that will satisfy the child of Adam is dirt. Meaning when they're buried. That's it. No more. Right? But again, Allah created us this way. And it's upon us to choose how we want to use this motivation. Do you want to use it for that which is harmful to us? Or are we going to use it in a way that's beneficial to us? I want more. But the Prophet and the Prophet is telling me, you want more? Then leave the things you don't need for the sake of Allah. Allah will give you more. And when we say Allah is giving us more, what does Allah give us? More of what? Tranquility, happiness, peace of mind, whatever it is, the true meaningful things in life. It might not be money, could be money, it might not be money. But why not? Because Allah knows that money isn't what satisfies the child of Adam. Right? Money is a blessing. Let's be very, very open here. But it's not the things that truly brings happiness and peace to an individual. We all know the rich person who's not happy. The rich person who has a terrible marriage. The rich person who can't see their kids because of how bad the relationships are. We know this. Right? So leaving something for the sake of Allah will always be replaced. Allah will always reward that person by replacing it with something better. So when they lower their gaze, they're leaving something for the sake of Allah. They're leaving something pleasurable, enjoyable for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so what Allah is going to replace it with is going to be even more pleasurable, even more enjoyable. You didn't look at that haram thing, then guess what? Remember how Allah is saying He's the light of the heavens and the earth? And part of that is to see the universe with insight, right? To see the universe in a very unique way. You lowered your gaze from looking at that one haram thing. Allah converts the entire universe into a source of pleasure for you. So when you look at the mountains, you're not like the atheists, the secularists, the scientists, who only see the physicality of that thing. They can't go beyond that. It's a mountain. That's it. This is how it's formed. This is how it functions. This is why it's important in the ecosystem. They can't go beyond it. But for the believer, once that nur of Allah is in their heart, they see that mountain as a message, as Allah communicating with you or to you. Don't you enjoy what you see? Don't you enjoy the beauty of this mountain? Look how this mountain is created in a way to benefit you. So what's funner? What's more pleasurable? What brings a sense of joy in the heart? To know the science behind mountains, or to see mountains as a symbol of Allah's compassion and love and mercy to you? To feel that, I think the answer is quite obvious. The fourth, or then Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi, before the next one, he gives us the opposite lens. Right? There's a lot of good for you to gain when you lower your gaze. But if you don't lower your gaze, it's a disaster. And he quotes the verse, لَعَمْرُكَ إِنَّهُمْ لَفِي سَكْرَتِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. Talking about the people of Lut. Allah says, Wallahi, by your age, by your life, is the only time Allah takes an oath by a human being. Right? By your life, they are intoxicated by their desires. They kept looking at the haram. They kept looking at that which they're not supposed to look at. It intoxicated them. They lost their minds because of how much haram they put in their heart through their eyes. And you might think, oh wow, this is kind of an exaggeration, or this is just storytelling at its best. No. Go research the harm of pornography. See what happens to people who are addicted to pornography. See what happens to them. It destroys their marriage. It destroys their life. It causes them to enter into depression. It destroys the individual. Sheikh Yasser has a lot of research on this. This is his expertise. Listen to what he has to say about the research here. Now, I know an individual called me and he had this problem. And how it's destroyed his life, or almost destroyed his life. He is going through a lot of difficulties because of this. And so, if lowering the gaze makes our universe around us a source of joy for us, not lowering the gaze makes us as though we're prisoners to our desires, unable to healthily live. That is the result of pornography. Right? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. The seventh benefit of lowering our gaze is أنه يورث القلب ثباتا وشجاعة وقوة. That lowering our gaze builds strength, resolve, and courage in our hearts. We live in a time where, the ladies are gonna enjoy this. You feel like men aren't men. They're not strong. Do you agree, ladies? Or not your husband? I'm not saying your husband, or maybe your husband. Whatever you want to decide. Let's keep that out. But generally speaking, when you remember in your childhood the personalities of your fathers, of your uncles, of the other guys, it's not like now. And I'm sure there's 1,001 reasons. I'm sure there's 1,001 reasons. But as we're learning here, we have to ask the question, to what extent has the widespread of exposing other people's awrat, right? They're parts that aren't supposed to be exposed. And looking at that day in, day out, they can't open the TV, you can't see a billboard, you can't do anything in school. You can't go to the mall, you can't go anywhere. I mean, even the aquarium, right? I was with my wife and Omar at the aquarium the other day. And my wife's looking around, it's like, where are we? I feel like we're in a fashion show. At the aquarium, right? I mean, it's hard to take, I have to think, where am I taking my child so he doesn't see this left and right? And it's a fashion show. I don't feel like I'm going to a place where you observe fish. Right? I don't mean to be derogatory, or I don't mean to put anyone down. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to be very real. It's like the guys who go there, the teenagers who go there, the adults who go there, they're not going to see fish. They have access to other things, and there are more, apparently. Right? And they're constantly seeing this, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. And now you have this generation of men who are weak. Again, there's 1,001, I'm sure there are 1,001 reasons for this. But we have to ask the question, to what extent, to how much of an extent does this play? So, lowering our gaze creates strength, resolve, because, when people talk about motivation, try and motivate you, you're a good person. You look at yourself, you look at your mirror, and you tell yourself, I'm going to be good today. And it's motivational speeches. I've never been a fan of motivational speeches. Why? Because you feel excited for a few hours and then, bam, you're back to stage one, right? You might put a bandage for a few hours, but the wound is still there. It's not solving anything. Real strength is not by being motivated. You're not going to be successful in anything because you're motivated and you're constantly motivated. It's unsustainable. Success is by discipline. That's how you become successful. Your generation, very disciplined. On time when you go to work, on time when you come home, you get the things done, right? Whether you enjoy the person or not, or they're a good person, that's one thing. But discipline is clear in the previous generation. There's discipline. This generation, there's no discipline. They want to become a YouTuber. They open a YouTube for 3 months, doesn't work, forget it. What's next? They enter into a major. I don't like I'm motivated, this major seems pretty cool, there's a career path for this. They take one semester, this is boring, the next thing. They're jumping left and right. There's no discipline. So without that discipline, there's no strength, there's no resolve, there's no courage. Well, if we can lower our gaze, or in order to lower our gaze, we need discipline. We need discipline. It is discipline. Lowering your gaze is discipline, and the inability to lower one's gaze is lack of discipline. So you can see how these two are connected. If I can discipline myself to lower my gaze, then by default it's going to create more will. I'm in control of myself, not my desires. And every time the opposite gender passes here or passes there, they can't control themselves. That's an undisciplined person, right? So it creates strength, resolve, or builds strength, resolve, and courage. And it said that الذي يخالف هواه يفرق الشيطان من ظله. Whoever goes against their desires, then the shaytan doesn't have a place around that person. The shaytan's grip over a person is in accordance to how much they follow their desires. And look at the world around you. Following desires, everything. What do I eat today? So many options. Alhamdulillah. right? But in the Arabic language, there's a saying: if you want to confuse someone, give them a lot of options. We all see this. Where do you want to eat today? I don't know. Okay, how about this? Nah. How about that? Nah. How about that? Nah. This is one funny video. A bunch of Egyptians are joking around, and they ask this question: what do you want to eat? Anything. Okay, how about this? No. How about that? No. How about that? No. How about that? No. He lists like 30 things. No, 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 no. Okay, what do you want to eat? Anything. Right? It's kind of a side joke there. But the shaytan's grasp over a person is commensurate to the strength of their hawa, their desires. The more they follow the desires, the easier the shaitan can influence that individual. But the more they go against their desires. And what does it mean to go against your desires? It doesn't mean you don't do anything that's pleasurable. That's not what going against desires is. Desires is that which is haram. That's what's meant here. Going against the haram causes the shaitan to leave your vicinity. And Al-Hasan rahimahullah ta'ala says, إِنَّهُمْ وَإِن طَقْطَقَتْ بِهِمْ الْبِغَالُ وَهَمَلْج what is this word? وَهَمْلَجَتْ بِهِمْ الْبَرَاذِينَ إِنَّ ذُلَّ الْمَعْصِيَةِ فِي رِقَابِهِمْ أَبَى اللَّهُ إِلَّا أَن يُذِلَّ مَنْ عَصَى. Basically, what Al-Hasan rahimahullah ta'ala is saying here is that no matter how outspoken and strong personality a person seems, no matter how nice they look, right, sin by default brings a person's value down. By default weakens them. Right? Because Allah refuses, Allah will not allow a sinful person to be honorable and dignified. But Al-Hasan is smart, he understands. He understands that, well, you have all these people who aren't part of our religion, who have strength and they have money and they have this and they have that. But Hassan is saying, look deeper, dig deeper. There's a type of weakness. Maybe it's not exposed. Maybe they're good at hiding it and covering it. Anyone who sins will feel that weakness. And think about this to the believing crowd. Think about this. When you do the sin, and we all do sins, no one is perfect, right? When you do a sin, how do you feel afterwards? Now, no one's going to answer because no one wants to admit that they have a... I'll admit it, right? I feel weak. Sure. Go ahead. You're welcome. What I feel is a sense of anxiety. Oh my God. This is not going to go unchecked. It's going to happen, right? Now, this type of concern and consciousness is healthy, right? If it leads to tawbah. But at the same time, when I feel that, I feel weakness. That's a sense of weakness. And that's the consequence of sin. Right? So when a person constantly looks at the haram, they're constantly looking at pornography. One of the things they fall into is what? Depression. So people, we're not trying to be discompassionate or uncompassionate or to look down upon these people. We're just trying to take the life lessons, right? We're trying to take life lessons. We're trying to modify our lifestyle, to discipline our lifestyle, so that we don't fall into things like this, so that we're stronger. That's the goal here. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. To Allah belongs izzah, dignity, strength, as well as the messenger and to the believers. Strength, real internal strength, is from one's relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Don't be sad. Don't feel weak. You are the higher ones, but under the condition, if you're believers. So again, you have another example. Belief and feeling of strength and power. And I don't mean power as violence, right? Strength and self-respect. There, it's related to our iman. And iman is a lifestyle. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, "Man kana yuridu al-izzata falillahi al-izzatu jami'a." Whoever is looking for strength, for dignity, for honor, then all of that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, you can only get it from Him. You only get it with Him. And Allah says, I'm not giving it for free. I don't just give it randomly. There's a way of getting it, and that is through his obedience, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the verse continues, إِلَيْهِ يَصْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُ. To him goes up the pure word, meaning La ilaha illallah or dhikr in general. And good deeds, right, ascend to Allah. You want izzah, you want strength, you want to get yourself out of depression, right? You got to discipline yourself. And there's some ways you can discipline yourself that are outside of the faith. And there are better ways of disciplining yourself, and that is through faith. This isn't contradiction, but there's a good way and there's a better way of getting yourself out of it, and that is through becoming disciplined. You know, another personal story. I remember when I was 14 years old, my father would tell me about the afterlife. He would speak about these things. So I believed in the afterlife. It was part of my mind. Yeah, I'm going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But like the vast majority of 14-year-olds, I mean, it's hard for a 14-year-old to be disciplined enough to pray 5 daily prayers and to be truly committed to the faith. Right? And so, you know, I'm 14, and I still remember very vividly, I would be in bed. You know, it takes a young one an hour to go to sleep because they woke up late and they didn't really do much throughout the day. So they still have energy and they're trying to go to sleep. But I remember thinking about the afterlife. And that caused me an amount of anxiety. Like, if I meet Allah, it's not going to go well. And this feeling of worry and anxiety, I didn't just experience it when I thought about Allah and the afterlife. I still remember in high school when I do bad on an exam, when I think about my future and all these other things, I felt the same type of anxiety. The same type. But when I committed, I began to pray my 5 daily prayers, I don't think I've ever felt that feeling again. Ever. This type of anxiety. It's not because I'm special. Anyone who does this is going to be given the same thing. There's a type of strength that Allah gifts the person who obeys Him. And there's a type of weakness that Allah puts in the heart of a person who disobeys Him. And again, back to the example, when you do that one sin and you're worried, you feel that amount of anxiety, that's the weakness that results from sin. Of course, the believer repents and that goes away, right? It's not long term. And that's that's very much part of our experience as a human being. All humans make mistakes, and the best are those who repent, right? The idea is strength comes from obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the dua qunut, what do we say? إِنَّهُ لَا يَذِلُّ مَنْ وَالَيْتَ وَلَا يَعِزُّ مَنْ عَادَيْتَ. The way Allah is structuring this is as a factual statement. It's not a dua that, oh Allah, allow this to happen. No, this is worded and as a factual statement. Certainly, the one who you guard will never feel weakness. And the one who you are an enemy of or to will never feel strength. They'll never feel izzah. And so we say this in dua qunut. The 8th benefit of lowering our gaze, أنه يسد على الشيطان مدخله إلى القلب, that it closes the doors of the shaytan, or the doors that the shaytan can enter to enter the person's heart. Right? So, you know, interesting, when I was listening to Sheikh Yasser, hopefully I'm not misquoting him here, about pornography and whatnot. He said that pornography, it plays with the person's mind. Why? Because it's an imagination. It's not real. It's like a fairy tale. What goes on and what happens and how it happens, it's a fairy tale. And so when the person is consuming this, right, it has an actual impact on the mind to where it rewires their mind and they begin to disconnect from reality. I'm not talking about become schizophrenic where they start hallucinating. Maybe in very extreme cases that could happen. But you know, if they look at others and other people and the situation in a way that's not real, there's a type of disconnect. So for example, another example, it can destroy a marriage. Why? Because the man becomes no longer attracted to his wife. who he was attracted to before. And he's unable to engage with her. Why? Because his mind isn't in reality. Now the shaytan, his goal is what? Or what can he do? He can put thoughts and whispers in our mind, in our heart. That's what he does. But you can see how the person who's constantly consuming this, the door has become so open that the shaytan can literally play with the person's mind. He can no longer see reality for what it is. I'm talking about in terms of his relationship with another woman, with his wife, or how he sees other women. And there are some crazy stories, right? There's some crazy stories about this. It is an illness. And looking at the world, and I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm gaining experience. If you were to ask me, I can eradicate one thing from earth, one thing. For me, right now, based on what I know, it'd be pornography. I would absolutely eradicate. I wouldn't eradicate alcohol. I wouldn't eradicate interest, although there are major problems. Right? But I think pornography is an even greater problem to individuals. It destroys entire society. And this is making billions and billions, unrestricted, very loosely regulated. Right? Only a few laws to regulate what can happen, what could happen, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. So lowering our gaze closes that door. And the shaitan loses his influence on the person, even if that means he can no longer whisper to you as frequently, as often. And when he does whisper, it's like as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described at the end of Surah Al-A'raf, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ تَذَكَّرُوا فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. The believers, when the shaitan whispers to them, Allah uses the word here, ta'if. And what this means is a very, very light and quick breeze. You know that quick wind that comes and just that's it, it's done? For the believer, that's the whisper of the shaitan. It comes and it's like a quick breeze. It has no effect, no influence. But nonetheless, the believers, from how adamant they are, how enthusiastic they are, how disciplined they are, they don't just, even that light breeze, they take advantage of it. By how? Tadhakkaru. They reflect. Wait a minute, where did this come from? Where did this come from? You know when you have a thought the crazy thought, and where did this come from? Like some people, they have difficulty with this. They think about, they're holding their child, and they think about, a thought comes to them. I'm just going to throw my child over the porch or outside or something like that. That's from the shaitan. We've all had this thought. Let's be real here, okay? I know we don't want to admit it. We've all had this thought. That's from the shaitan. But how long did that thought last? It's like, what the heck? Where did this come from? We get this type of reaction and say, no way. You start kissing your child, oh, I love you so much, this and that. This is how the believer is. That small whisper of the shaitan comes, whoa, that's not me. Where did this come from? Tadhakkaru. They start reflecting. فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. They start thinking, where did this come from? Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe this is that. They build themselves. They strengthen themselves. Look at their reaction. But for those who are immersed in sin, right, they begin to think that, wait, this is coming from me. There are people, I've spoken to counselors who said that they come and they think that these thoughts are rooted in their personality. This very thought of like throwing their child off of a roof or something like that. They think that, oh my God, I'm a messed up person. How can I think this? Oh, this is me. I have problems. When all that's going on, the shaitan is able to root that whisper in the heart for whatever reason. Again, we're not here to judge. We're here to judge ourselves, no one else. The idea is lowering your gaze makes the whispers of the shaitan like that brief gust of wind, and you know how to react to it. Whereas the one who's constantly looking at haram, it always amazes me. Remember Game of Thrones? Right? It's not old, but it's done now. Muslims would talk about this, and so it's very normal to watch. I don't know if you're familiar with the content. It is very explicit. It's bad. Good, don't see it. Don't see it. The content is very, very graphic. And you have married couples watching it together. How do you do this? How? Right? How? It's not right. It's not healthy. It's not appropriate. I don't want my wife looking at things that she's not supposed to be looking at. I have an amount of dignity, as she has the same. Like any man and any woman would be jealous if their spouse even accidentally sees something. It's not right. And these couples are watching it, married couple watching it together, and they're perfectly fine with it. That's not right. That's not healthy. At that point, there's an amount of muru'ah, amount of chivalry that's being chipped away or just clearly missing. It's not healthy. That's weakness. How many more of these are there? There are two more, it looks like. Yeah, there are two more. So, very quickly here. التاسعة, the ninth benefit is أنه يفرغ القلب للفكرة في مصالحه والاشتغال بها. We have thoughts, right? Now, a normal amount of thoughts, we know what that is. You think about something and your thoughts go on. Maybe you're constantly thinking about something, but it's not a storm of thoughts. This. Once you get to that level, that's a problem. Like, you have to see like a mental health professional, right? But normally, you're thinking about things constantly, but you feel like there's a smooth kind of flow of thoughts. It's not crazy. And so one of the benefits of lowering one's gaze is that it clears up the mind and allows the mind to focus on things that are truly of your benefit, that are positive uses of your time. One of the problems of depression, one of the symptoms of depression, is that the person constantly is back projecting and is looking at the now. I am worthless. I'm a problem. Why is this happening to me? That's where their mindset is. And it imprisons them in this cyclone of this hurricane of negative emotions that ties them to the past. This is one of the tricks of the shaytan, and he uses it so much with reverts. So much. Or Muslims who, had a dark part of their life prior to committing. Shaitan comes and says, what do you think you're doing? All that you do, you think Allah is just going to forgive you? You did this and you did that. You really think you're worth it? You think you say a few words, La ilaha illallah, and that's it, it's done, it's over? What is the shaitan trying to do? He's trying to shackle that individual in a chain of regrets. Regrets. And that regret is meant to pull them down to where they feel worthless. That's what the shaitan wants to do. Okay. And it's a very difficult test, and it's a very difficult mindset. And depression is also a type of mindset. I'm not saying a mindset causes depression, but I'm saying when a person is depressed, they're in a certain mindset. I'm not worth it. There's no reason to do anything because I don't deserve it. There's no reason for me to go and do this and that or try to change. I'm not worth it. I heard a story the other day of a young lady who was so depressed, she wouldn't get out of bed for months. Months. And as a result of that, her hair became so entangled and so whatnot. And so she finally mustered the energy to go to a salon. She went to a salon and she told her stylist, just shave it off. I'm not even going to bother you with trying to fix this. Just shave it off because I'm not even worth it. I'm not worth your time. And the stylist is someone with a good heart. She said, I was so impacted by that I said, no, I'm going to do whatever it takes to fix this. She said 13 hours. It took her 13 hours to untangle it. She fixed it. She made it look like hair. Right? And she didn't take any money for it. But the one who's depressed, this young lady who's depressed, said, thank you for at least seeing some worth in me. She said, that's the best tip anyone has ever given me. So it's a mindset. But we Muslims, we're going to take it a step further. We're going to dig a little bit more. Where's this mindset coming from? What's causing it? And we Muslims are going to say sins can cause these mindsets. It could be the consequence of constantly doing haram, not repenting from it, right? And when we talk about these things, let's be clear here. Everyone's going to feel depressed every now and then. That's normal. That's part of life. That's part of your iman and your relationship with Allah. We worship Allah in times of happiness and excitement. We worship Allah in times of difficulty and grief. right? I'm talking more about that which is persistent and it has a clear impairment on the person's ability to live what we'd call a normal standard life. This is what we're talking about here. Okay? So when we lower our gaze, it frees up the mind, it clears the consciousness. And never underestimate how sins can affect that. Another story, I have a bunch of stories today. Maybe you heard of this. In the Arab world, there's a really big da'i, and there was a big CEO in the West. I don't know where, America, somewhere in the West. And one day, he walks upon one of his employees with his foot in the sink, and he's washing his foot. I know that's kind of bizarre. We've all had to we'll do it in public and look real quickly so hopefully no one sees us. And we make sure we wear our socks so we can just wipe on our socks. And this guy has his foot in the sink. The CEO's like, what are you doing? That's bizarre. And this guy, this Muslim, obviously, he's pretty confident in himself. He said, I'm making ablution. I have to pray. It's like, yeah, but you're putting your dirty feet in the sink. And the guy is he's pretty bold. This Muslim is pretty bold. He said, I wash my feet 5 times a day. Don't worry, my feet are cleaner than your face. All right? Now the CEO was pretty impressed by his boldness. So he became curious. Started to learn more about Islam, till he finally took his shahada. And he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And then right after, he said, what is the secret of this word that as soon as I said it, I feel a sense of peace of mind? What is the secret here? Right? That's repentance. That's Allah removing the consequence and the residue of sin to make the person feel at ease. That's tranquility coming down. Tranquility has to do with the heart, the emotional state. Tranquility has to do with the mental state. Tranquility has to do with what's going on in your life. Again, everyone goes through challenges. That's part of Iman. Are we going to worship Allah unconditionally or only in certain conditions that we see fit? I'm talking about the persistence of problems that has a clear impact on your ability to deal with day-to-day life. So Ibn Qayyim is saying, when you lower your gaze, it helps you clear your consciousness to allow you to focus on the future. What am I going to do? And I tell people, if you're going through a difficulty, during the difficulty, don't ask the question, why am I going through this? Yes, there is an answer to that. Now is not the time to try and discover that answer. Now the question is, what do I need to do to deal with this? Because the why ties you in to the now. The what makes your outlook the future. That's how you have to be in order to go forward. And then the final, to conclude here, the final benefit of lowering one's gaze, al-ashira, أن بين العين والقلب منفذا وطريقا يوجب انفصال أحدهما عن الآخر وأن يصلح بصلاحه ويفسد بفساده. Basically what he's saying, that there is a channel between the eyes and the heart. What goes into the eyes makes its way to the heart. There's a channel, a tunnel, whatever you want to call it. When you look at haram, it damages that tunnel. And so it makes it harder for you to benefit from not your physical sense of sight, but your spiritual sense of sight. And that kind of ties into what we said before. So if roads need to be paved every now and then, and as a result of weather conditions, especially when you go out east in the colder regions, as soon as spring comes along, you have potholes everywhere. Why? It rained, the rain got into the asphalt, it froze, freezing expands the water, breaks the streets, you have potholes, right? That's what happens to the channel between the eye and the heart when haram is entering it. But when halal, or what pleases Allah, or tawbah enters it's like paving the road once again to make it smoother and easier and more pleasurable for you to use. Allah ta'ala alam. We'll continue next time, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.